Hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this session on the core project. I have the pleasure of chairing it and introducing our three distinguished speakers. So I will go in the order in which they will present, and our first speaker is going to be Wendy Carlin. So Wendy is a professor of economics at University College London, and she's also a fellow of CPR. Now, Wendy works on macroeconomics, institutions, economic performance, economics on transitions, and she has quite a distinct profile for this session. First of all, because in her life she has written books, not many textbooks also. Not many of us get to do that. I find it absolutely intimidating, and not one or two, she's written three. And then she's one of the key driving forces underlying the core project, of which I won't say anything because Wendy and Tim and Tony are going to talk about it. But indeed, it's really very much, we owe it to her and a small group of other economists if we have this great tool now, which is now used in top places, including UCL, Sciences Po, Toulouse, and University of Cape Town, I just learned from Wendy. Now, after Wendy, we're going to have Tim speaking, and Tim is Sir Tim Besley, is a school professor of economics at Arthur Lewis Professor of Development Economics at the LSE. He's a member of many things. He's been in the Monetary Policy Committee, he's been president of the Econometric Society, fellow of Econometric Society, British Academy, American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Too long for me to list all the titles. I like to remember that Tim's research has spanned many areas that are I think very close to what the key topics are nowadays, and in this sense also, you know, what CORE is trying to do is to teach stuff that's relevant. And in fact, Tim has worked on development economics, public economics, political economy, making path-breaking contributions in all these areas. And finally, we have Antonio Cabales, who's also been all things you can imagine. Now, he's only a professor at UCL. He was the head of department until last month, I think. He's executive vice president of the European Economic Association, and having been past president myself, I can tell you that the EEA would not run without Antonio, so that's a big thing to note. He's been president of the Spanish Economic Association and also chairman of Carlos Terceiro when he was teaching there. Now, Antonio's research is even broader than you might think. He's covered things such as learning, evolutionary games, but also experiments, economics of networks, mechanism design, and more issues related to health and education. And for those of you who don't follow him on Twitter, you should, because he's actually a very active influencer, which puts him in a good position to talk about communicating economics and teaching it also to others. So this, I think, is where I should stop and give the floor to a more qualified speaker for the session, Wendy.
Thank you very much, Eliana, and thank you everyone for coming. So this is what we're going to be focusing on, teaching economics for public purpose. And, oops, what's happening? Sorry, lost. There we go. Okay, so Eliana told us we should be watching Twitter. And this is there's a lot going on Twitter about economics education, particularly in response to the emergence of a new textbook by Betsy Stevenson and Justin Wolfers. So this is the kind of way this has been discussed. Suresh Naidu, who at Columbia, who's one of the authors of the core textbooks, intervening with Wolfers. This is a very civilized kind of Twitter discussion. And you can see that Wolfers is saying, I admire the audacity of the core team in trying to develop tools for understanding diverse capitalisms. What he's doing, what they're doing in their book is something different. It's about students living their lives, making better individual decisions. So this is a real kind of fork in the road now, and teachers of economics and students, I think we have some students here as well, are going to be exposed to different kinds of courses now. So this is the, and what I wanted to do was to really start by taking everyone back to the last time there was a revolution in the way economics was taught. And this was, if you look here at the data, the headlines, this was the Great Depression, and what happened was that a big event in the world, namely the Great Depression and the emergence of persistent unemployment, came together with new economics, new research trying to make sense of that event in the form of the general theory. So this was the start of a new way of teaching economics, which was Samuelson's 1948 textbook. So if you look here, this is Samuelson, this is the first page, and this is what he said. Today the non-specialist in physics deserves and expects to learn about atomic energy and nuclear structure in his first year of study, rather than to remain bogged down in elementary experiments on falling bodies and heat calorimetry. So why then should teachers of economics withhold from the first year course the really interesting and vital problems of overall economic policy? And the dean who introduced this conference yesterday specifically listed 4 overall problems of economic policy: globalization, inequality, the future of work, and the climate emergency. Okay, so these are different problems from the ones that Samuelson was bringing into the textbook. In physics, the big move happened in the early 1960s with the Feynman lectures in physics. This was Samuelson's very first question. So the first question that students were given to deal with was, how do you expect to fare in the next depression? He was writing the book primarily to try and, as he says, aim at an understanding of the economic institutions and problems of American civilization in the middle of the 20th century. And what he was also doing, and this is a theme that I want to keep running through this session, is that he was saying that the methods of analysis used are those that have been employed by 90% of the active academic economists under the age of 50 over the last decade. So it's this bringing together of new problems in the world with new research, with new economic knowledge that marked Samuelson's mission in his textbook. He had a revolutionary table of contents. You can see here that it starts with national income, it goes on with national income, and in part 3 it's still going on with national income. Actually, it's now national output, and you'll see here, interestingly, we have at chapter 19 the determination of price by supply and demand. So Samuelson rearranged, radically reordered the way that economics was taught, that the economics textbook was written, shoving to the back the theory of value, which had been the traditional starting point for economics courses. So this was page 447, where he begins his discussion of supply and demand. And then you think, okay, so there's a major section on supply and demand. 10 pages later, he says, well, that's all there is to be said about supply and demand. So supply and demand, which has expanded enormously in the undergraduate teaching of economics, especially in the first year, was really shrunk by Samuelson to a very small section towards the back of the book. And he pointed out that with marginal costs falling, then competition tends to break down, and he listed these the categories of the economy in which that model of pure or perfect competition would obtain, suggesting that it just was relevant for a few agricultural industries. So he was really playing down the central focus of economics teaching that had prevailed to that point. So now we're in a situation where there is a lot of debate about what we should be doing in our introductory courses. This was a blog written in response to the fact that Greg Mankiw was stepping down from teaching the famous Ec 10 course at Harvard. In the blog, there was a big call out for the core project, indicating what we were doing in the project, and also making very clear that everything being produced in this project is available free for anyone anywhere in the world. So here it is again in the Washington Post. It's time we tear up our economics textbooks, and again links to Cause the Economy. So there is a kind of debate out there on Twitter, in the major newspapers in the United States, in the UK, also in France, and there's also been some coverage as well in other countries, including Italy, India, and so on. So what I was going to do first was to just give a bit of background to what we're doing in this project, which is doing the Samuelsonian thing in a sense, bringing together new questions with new economics, but it can be thought of in the same way that Thomas Kuhn talks about scientific paradigms. So what we're doing is more than somehow making economics relevant or more real world. There's a real sense in which what we're doing is to change the basic benchmark model of the economy. By a benchmark, we think of what are the people in the economy like, how do they interact, what are the institutions in the economy, what are the rules, and how do we evaluate economic outcomes. So we're trying to get a grip on that, and we've done some work on this by, see here, what Kuhn said, the scientific community's paradigms are revealed in its textbooks. So this is, there's a sort of connection, if you like, between what a science is, what economics is, and how that's revealed to students. And we go about this using machine learning, topic modeling, and I'm just going to do a tiny dipping of the toe into this to give you some sense of how we can look at the course of economic research over more than 100 years and how that's been reflected in the textbooks. So this is what I'll do. I'll just give you a very simple idea of what topic modeling is. So this is a Bayesian machine learning approach, and it's the idea is to use machine learning to reveal the hidden themes that could have written a series of texts, a series of documents. And the series of documents that we have in mind is economic research from 1900 to 2014. So that's going to be the source of the themes that we'll extract. And then we're going to see how those themes appear in the textbooks. So we're going from the research via the topic modeling to the textbooks. Of course, we could have looked at the indexes or read the table of contents, but the idea was somehow to remove us, the researcher, from making these judgments. So topic modeling is just literally observing the words in documents. There's nothing to do with the order of the words in the documents or the meaning of the words. It's simply the presence of words that matters. So let me give you an idea of how we do this. So the thematic structure is hidden in these documents, and we're trying to extract it through this Bayesian machine learning process. As I said, all that we've got are bags of words, so think of every article in that corpus of research as a bag of words. We're going to look for 100 topics, 100 because there's about 100 Journal of Economic Literature classifications, so it seems like a reasonable number of themes that could be the hidden themes writing the research. We then name them, and we'll look at them, we'll visualize them as well. So this is an idea of the topic. Topic 4. There are 100 of them, this is topic 4. So if you have a look at this topic, which is just a bag of weighted words, then any of you in the room could think of what to name this topic. Anyone got any ideas? What would you call this topic? Quality car, merger, attribute, vehicle, high quality. Sorry? IO, a bit narrower. And think of there being 100 of these.
Adverse selection.
Excellent. So, hang on. We've lost it. Yeah, it is adverse selection. I'll show you it again in a minute. Yeah. Okay, so this is the research corpus. These are all the journals. There's about 27,000 journals that we've used. We get about 11,000 words. And what we do is to create this. So these are the words in all the end documents that we're going to explain by the 100 topics. So to make it more realistic, take an article that you know very well. So think of Akerlof's article, 1970. Cross out all the words that are not salient to the economic content. Stick the words in a bag. That's your bag of words. Okay, so that's going to be the corpus that we're going to be using to derive the topics. And that's the word cloud of the adverse selection lemons topic, which is very heavily weighted in Akerlof's article, but the article in the corpus most heavily weighted in topic 4 is this one here. Okay, so let me just give you one more example. Think about what were the themes that were writing Solo's famous growth model paper. Just keep it in your head. So it's mainly topic 57, surprisingly enough, called growth models. The words in it are growth, dynamic, steady state, output, long run. They're the words that make up that topic, the most heavily weighted words. Then you've got various kind of boring things about the kind of language, then production functions. So we're kind of hopefully feeling reasonably comfortable that this method of topic modeling is giving us some way of thinking about content. Does it actually capture the novelty of Samuelson 1948? So what we do here is we compare it with the preceding textbook, which was by Eli, the most commonly used textbook in the US before Samuelson, and you can see that, yes, indeed, this is what Samuelson brought into the textbook. That's all that national income stuff that he brought to the front of the book. So our question today, and inside this room, outside this room, is whether we are in another Samuelsonian moment. This is the debt-to-income ratio building up before the global financial crisis. In some ways, the kicking off of the debate about economics teaching really started with the global financial crisis. So that's why these data and reports are evocative. And one of the things that you're going to see plenty of this today, but one of the things we've done in classrooms is to ask students, what's the most pressing problem that economists should be addressing? So if you can form in your head what you think a word cloud would look like in response to this question, if you asked your students, what would they come up with? So this is what the students respond. And these are, this is a global survey of nearly 4,500 students in 25 universities around the world. This is the sample from Universidad de Los Andes last year. So that students come up with these problems that they think we as economists should be facing, and the question is whether we can bring those questions into the classroom in a way that's parallel to what Samuelson 1948 did in bringing aggregate demand, the Keynesian analysis, into the classroom in response to the problems of the Great Depression. We can look at how the research corpus has changed, because remember, what we're trying to do is to say research has changed, the problems have changed, we need to change what we're teaching our students. This was the themes that were characteristic of research when Samuelson was publishing his textbook. And these are the themes that are now characteristic of research. So in all the sessions that we've been listening to in the conference, these are the themes that have been that have populated those sessions. Very different from the research themes at the time of Samerson. So we again take a leaf from Samerson and say, well, Samerson realized he had to rewrite the whole book, so we will have to do that as well. So let me just bring some of these concepts to the front of the book. So innovation, if we're going to teach about innovation, the future of work, then we have to bring in new concepts. Environmental sustainability, concepts that are typically missing from the first year course. Inequality, unemployment, financial instability. All related to the research literature over the last century. This is written up in a Journal of Economic Literature article that you can get from the version is already there on the website. But let's get to this business about a benchmark, because this somehow is at the heart of what the core project is doing. It's presenting a different view about what people are like, the role of nature, how economists should think about nature, social interactions, information, all the way down through this list, and power, for example. In the standard benchmark, it's just market power, government power, which are exogenous. Economic rents are always inefficient. They originate in mistaken public policy or in limited competition. Just to give you an example. So what would the new benchmark, consistent with contemporary research and with what we do in core, what would that look like? So we have a much richer representation of what people are like. The economy is part of the biosphere. It isn't just left out of economics. Crucially, information is often incomplete, asymmetric, and non-verifiable. We're in a world where contracts are incomplete in labour and credit markets. So I'm not going to go all the way through the list, but I think you can get some sense that, for example, power, we now have the analytical tools to use principal agent models to teach about labour and credit markets, and we can bring them into the introductory classroom. So let me move quickly to the core project itself. These were the complaints that were coming from students. From teachers, from policymakers and public policy observers. And we can just summarize it. Okay, so that was really the impetus for us to get this project underway. We've produced 3 ebooks, which I won't dwell on here. This is the team, so you can see Tim is there, played a part in writing part of the book. Antonio as well. Juan Camilo Cardenas from Colombia, Daniel Hochman from University of Chile. People from around the world, different institutions, different specializations, coming together collaboratively and voluntarily. So this project is a voluntary effort. We hope to get lots of the people here in the room involved in this as well. Everything is free online. It's a partnership with New Tech in publishing, based in Cape Town, and with the oldest publisher in the world, OUP, to give us some kind of credibility in print. So this is the reach to date. Eliana mentioned this, just some examples of universities. And I looked at the universities using core in the La Silla region. So we've got quite a few universities have already taken it up. Some, I think, represented in the room. Anyone here has been using the core material in their classroom? Okay, we have some. Excellent, back row. Fantastic. Right, so I'm really running out of time, but I'm just going to very quickly give you, for those of you who are not familiar with it, a quick sense of why it's so different. We don't start with the question, as in the Stevenson's-Wolfers book, of how much you would pay for a cup of coffee. We start with something real that's happened in the world, the capitalist revolution, and how it's dramatically changed living standards. The first data they see is this rather extraordinary data of a phase transition from a world in which nothing happened. Living standards were stable over hundreds and hundreds of years and pretty similar across regions of the world. Something changed, and students get pretty riveted to this uptick in the hockey stick and wanting to know, have an explanation in their economics course of how this could have happened. We use lots of visualizations like this one of the world income distribution, with countries ranked from poorest to richest on the horizontal, and the lowest decile to the highest going back. If you look at that, you'll realize this is a long time ago, but you can jump and see how the world's changed. And the theme of inequality is obviously very just visually revealed through an image like this. We introduce actors before markets, so that's why supply and demand come so late. And we integrate the teaching of micro and macro by using a series of principal agent problems. Employer-employee gives us involuntary unemployment in equilibrium. Banks and borrowers give us credit constraints from the beginning. So you can see that all those ad hoc things you typically have to do in macro come naturally in the way that students are introduced to the actors in the economy. I won't spend time comparing MANQ with core, but it can be done using the 100 topics. The last substantive thing I want to do is just to focus on the pedagogy. The conventional approach in economics teaching is you teach the theory, and then you find a simple application that will illustrate the theory. We use a different pedagogy. So the pedagogy used in core starts from a complex real problem. It then goes to the theory to illuminate, give students tools with which to understand that problem, and then it goes back to the real problem using those tools as a lens to get further insight. So how do we teach a model of constraint optimization using this approach? Start with the motivation, build a model, go back to the evidence, critically evaluate the model. So that's the method, a very, very different method from the one that we were taught when we were taught economics. Here it is in practice. That's the data, long-run data on GDP per capita and hours of work, cross-country data. Do the model, go back to the data, put the data using the same axes back into the model, and use that as a starting point for asking how good is the model? How much light does that actually shed on the questions with which we began? Okay, we know what we do. Let's bring that into the classroom for our students. Does it work? The question we'll be asking. This is the UCL evidence from the first introduction of core, looking at results to students on their second year unchanged intermediate courses. Nothing happened to their results in econometrics, but their results in intermediate micro and macro improved. We particularly seem to be catching students who got demotivated in those very tough courses in the second year. Somehow the core in the first year was carrying them through the second year. These are just methods of using the feasible set to analyze a whole range of different problems. Helps us to understand, I think, why it works, because students get a common set of tools and come to believe that those tools can be used to analyze different problems. Okay, I'm running out of time, so this is just to give you some temptation to have a look at the project. We use the same model for the profit maximizing firm as for the rent maximizing elite that sets the tax. And we do a lot of work on new skills, but that will be covered in the workshop that we're running on CORE, which takes place tomorrow afternoon. So I'm going to stop there.